she appeared again, not to a few, but to thousands. Workers, soldiers, families all staring at the same light above a small church in Cairo. Cameras captured it, newspapers printed it. Even scientists tried to explain it. Half a century later, no one can. This is the night the Virgin Mary appeared to thousands of people. Cairo, April 1968. A restless city at the edge of spring. The war of the previous year still hung in the air like dust over the desert, a silence that lived inside people more than around them. By day, the city roared with engines and bargaining voices. By night, it sank into a tired kind of stillness, streetlights flickering over sand-colored walls. No one expected anything to happen here, least of all in Zeitoun, a modest district north of the city center, where mechanics worked, buses rattled past, and life carried on exactly as it had the day before. At the corner of Tom Bay Street stood a small Coptic church, barely large enough to hold a few dozen people. Its dome rose quietly above the rooftops, crowned with a simple metal cross that caught the glow of traffic headlights. Most evenings it was forgotten by the city until one Tuesday night in April. It began, as great stories often do, with ordinary eyes noticing something no one else did. A mechanic named Farid was finishing his shift at the garage across the street. He stretched, looked up, and froze. On the roof of the church, a pale form shimmered in the darkness. He thought it was a woman. For a second, he feared the worst, someone about to jump. He shouted for help. Others ran out from the garage, their hands still black with oil, squinting against the streetlights. What they saw did not move. The figure stood upright, motionless, haloed in white light. It was not blinding. It was gentle, the kind of light that seems to breathe instead of burn. Someone whispered, "It's a reflection." Another said, "It's electricity." But then the light grew brighter, rising above the dome, outlining a shape unmistakably human, yet untouchable. The street fell silent. Within minutes, more people arrived. Drivers pulled over. Neighbors leaned from balconies. Across the road, the garage emptied. The cafe next door too. By midnight, hundreds stood staring upward in the warm night air, all eyes fixed on the dome. Muslims, Christians, skeptics, no one argued. They only watched. In those first hours, there was no talk of miracles. No one thought of prophecy or messages. They were only trying to understand what they were seeing. Some saw a woman in white. Others saw light taking the form of wings. One witness said the glow pulsed gently, as if in rhythm with breathing. Another swore the light bent forward in blessing before fading. When the form disappeared, the crowd gasped and waited. 15 minutes later, it returned. The police arrived soon after. They ordered the crowd back, fearing hysteria. But even the officers could not look away. They climbed to nearby rooftops, searching for projectors or mirrors. Nothing. The air itself seemed to shimmer. One officer later admitted, "We found no source for the light, and yet it was there." By dawn, the story was already on the streets. A mysterious light had appeared over a church in Zeitoun. For some, it was a trick of the eyes. For others, the first sign of something heaven sent. No one realized that what began as a single night's curiosity would continue for 3 years, witnessed by hundreds of thousands, filmed, photographed, and written into the history of a nation. But that is still ahead. For now, Cairo sleeps again, not knowing that the next night, and the one after, the same light will return, brighter, calmer, unmistakable. The morning after the first night, Cairo was already whispering. Taxi drivers told passengers about a light above the church. Vendors repeated it in the markets. By afternoon, Newspapers were calling it a strange glow. That second night, the streets near the little church were full before sunset. Families arrived carrying stools and thermoses of tea, unsure what they were waiting for. Police cordoned the street. Skeptics brought binoculars. The faithful brought candles. Somewhere between curiosity and prayer, a crowd of thousands looked toward a single white dome. The air that night was still, the kind of heat that holds sound. People spoke softly, as if afraid to break whatever might happen. Then, near midnight, someone gasped. A pulse of light rippled across the roof, faint, then brighter, until the dome itself seemed to breathe. The crowd pressed forward, every face lifted. A woman cried, "There, she's there." But the form was not yet clear, only a radiance forming slowly above the cross. No projector, no beam, no voice, only a presence. The scene lasted minutes, then faded. When the light vanished, silence fell heavier than before. And again, 15 minutes later, it returned. By the end of that week, tens of thousands filled Zeitoun each evening. Buses lined the streets for kilometers. Entire neighborhoods gathered in the open air, drawn by something they could not name. Local photographers brought their cameras, cheap black and white film, slow shutter speeds. The exposures were shaky, but the shapes that appeared on the negatives stunned even skeptics. A bright figure hovering above the dome, arms outstretched, sometimes surrounded by small luminous doves. Police investigations multiplied. Engineers scoured rooftops for hidden lights. They found nothing. Witnesses were interviewed separately. Their descriptions matched. A woman in luminous white, silent, motionless, occasionally bowing or blessing the crowd. Government officials, wary of hysteria, ordered controlled studies. Electrical companies were consulted. Astronomers were asked about atmospheric reflections. None could explain a recurring shape visible from every angle to crowds of believers and doubters alike. And yet, no one called it a miracle, not officially. Reporters wrote of a phenomenon. Scientists called it a mass optical experience. But for those who stood beneath the glow night after night, names didn't matter. What they felt was peace, an impossible calm settling over a city known for noise. Eyewitnesses later recalled that the crowd itself changed during those hours. People stopped shouting. Children slept quietly on their parents' laps. Strangers shared water and shade. One Muslim shopkeeper was quoted saying, "Whatever it was, it made us pray together." From rooftops and alleys, the light was filmed again and again. Some nights it appeared for seconds, others for hours. Sometimes the luminous shape circled the dome as if walking. Dr. Kerry Malek was among the first witnesses to see it.
I was standing over there near the fence and holding that iron fence as strong as I could because of the pressure of the crowd. And it was about 8:30 in the evening, and I saw a light coming out from the this dome, which is the southwest dome, and the light began to increase gradually, and then suddenly the Holy Mother was standing in front of the dome. She stood there for about 15 minutes, and then she began to walk, and she stood in front of that cross, and she knelt and stood up again, and then she walked to the northern side of the church, just above the area where I was standing, and she looked at the crowd, and she blessed them, and she smiled, and I can say that I saw her teeth when she smiled. I was preparing in my mind about 7 or 8 requests from her when I saw her, One of them was to cure me from asthma, which I had for about 20 years. When I saw the Holy Mother, I found myself trembling and tears coming down my cheek.
After several weeks, the phenomenon no longer belonged to Zeitoun alone. Trains arrived from Alexandria, buses from Upper Egypt, pilgrims by the tens of thousands. Photographs spread abroad. Foreign journalists came. The story was out yet still. No one could say what it was. Behind the scenes, Coptic Pope Kyrillos Roman VI quietly formed a commission to record witness testimony. The findings were cautious but consistent. Hundreds of independent accounts describing the same radiant woman above the same church, seen from streets blocks apart. There was no message, no words, no gestures of warning, only light, appearing again and again for years. And still, every night, as the crowd waited, the city held its breath. For nearly 2 months, the crowds kept returning. People came expecting nothing more than a repetition of the same shimmer of light they had seen before. What they witnessed one warm June night would mark the moment that the story of Zeitoun passed from rumor to history. Shortly after 11 o'clock, a deep glow began to form behind the church's smaller dome. This time it did not fade. It grew brighter until the roof itself was hidden in white radiance. Out of that brilliance, a clear figure emerged, the outline of a woman robed in light, standing above the cross, hands extended as though in blessing. Witnesses said her movement was slow, graceful, silent. Cameras clicked. The crowd, tens of thousands now, went completely still. Police officers, who had been stationed to keep order, lowered their weapons and removed their hats. Many fell to their knees. A journalist later wrote that the noise of the city seemed to stop, as if Cairo itself were holding its breath. For almost half an hour, the luminous figure remained visible. A group of white birds, doves of light, people said appeared and circled the dome 3 times before vanishing into the night sky. When the apparition faded, there was no confusion or panic, only quiet weeping and whispered prayer. News spread across Egypt in a single day. The next evening, television crews arrived. Several film reels captured the light, though the glowing figure appeared only faintly on celluloid. Still, the evidence was undeniable. Something bright and unexplainable was manifesting above that little church night after night. Officials from the Coptic Orthodox Patriarchate documented sworn statements from Muslims, Christians, and foreign visitors. Pope Kyrillos Roman VI himself visited Zeitoun. After reviewing the testimonies and photographic records, the Patriarchate released a statement on May 4, 1968, declaring the events worthy of belief. It was one of the few times in modern history that a church body recognized a public apparition witnessed by an entire city. What astonished many was the absence of any message. No voice spoke, no words were written in the sky. The apparition of Zeitoun did not warn or predict. It simply appeared light over darkness, silence over noise. In a nation divided by faith and shaken by war, it became a sign of peace that belonged to everyone. Pilgrims arrived from across the Middle East. Some claimed physical healings. Others said the experience healed something deeper: fear, grief, despair. Newspapers in Cairo, Beirut, and Rome ran front-page photographs. Even state officials, cautious of religious enthusiasm, allowed the crowds to gather. By the time the phenomenon ceased in 1971, hundreds of thousands, perhaps more, had seen it. Scholars later tried to interpret the meaning of Zeitoun. Some called it a vision of reconciliation, others a symbol of faith surviving modernity. Yet the people who had stood there described it more simply: a light that made them feel loved, a silence that spoke without words. Half a century later, the dome still stands on Tomon Bay Street. At night, the traffic hums and neon signs flicker, but sometimes, visitors say, when the wind stills, The metal cross catches a reflection from the street lamps below and glows faintly in the dark. It is not the same light, but it is enough to make passers-by pause and look up, remembering the nights when all Cairo did the same. When the light finally stopped appearing in 1971, the people of Cairo felt as if a quiet visitor had departed. For 3 years, the nights around the church had been filled with expectation. Suddenly, the sky returned to ordinary darkness. Yet the peace that had settled over Zeitoun did not fade. It had already passed into memory, into stories told in coffee houses and classrooms, in families who still said, "We were there." Photographs and film reels were gathered into archives. Scientists studied the negatives. Theologians debated meaning. The questions never changed. What was it? Why there? Why then? But no explanation, physical or metaphysical, ever erased what people remembered feeling. Not fear, not frenzy, but hope. For the Coptic Church, the event became a point of renewal. Pope Kyrillos called it a gift of consolation for a nation in sorrow. For Muslims who had stood beside Christian neighbors, it became a story of shared reverence. In Islam, Mary is also honored as pure and chosen. Zeitoun therefore remained a rare moment when the divisions of creed dissolved under the same light. Outside Egypt, the event inspired fresh devotion. Pilgrims carried small photos of the luminous figure to Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Writers compared Zeitoun to Fatima or Lourdes, yet noted its singular character. No words, no children, no secrets, only a vision visible to all. In a century crowded with noise, it was silence that converted hearts. Half a century later, witnesses still describe the same sensation. An elderly taxi driver once said, "I do not know if it was heaven, but when I looked up, I felt heaven looking back." That sentence captures the meaning of Zeitoun better than any document or decree. The little church on Tomon Bay Street is now surrounded by new buildings and neon signs. Tour buses pass, vendors sell postcards, but every evening the caretaker lights a single candle beneath the dome. It is a reminder that faith often survives in small gestures, not grand events. If one theme unites the story, it is this: light is not conquered by darkness. Empires rise and fall, wars begin and end, ideologies come and go. But a single act of illumination, whether on a desert road or a crowded city roof, can echo through generations. Maybe that is why people still come. They do not expect to see the same radiance. They come because they once heard that in a time of doubt, a woman of light stood above a dome and said nothing, and that her silence was enough. As the nights passed and the crowds in Zeitoun kept swelling, the question changed from "what did you see?" to "how could it be possible?" The glow above the church had become a national mystery. To believers, it was already holy. To the authorities, it was something that needed explaining. The first to investigate were the local police. They searched the rooftops and alleys around the Church of St. Mary with flashlights, looking for a projector or mirror that could cast a shape onto the dome. Nothing. They traced the power lines in the district and checked for newly registered lights or advertising equipment. None had been installed. The officers kept returning each night, sometimes against orders, because they too wanted to know what they were guarding. Next came the engineers. They arrived with measuring rods and notebooks, convinced that physics would settle the matter. They studied the curve of the dome, the angle of the streetlights, the haze that hung above Cairo after sundown. If a reflection could form there, it would have to bounce from miles away, but no such surface existed. The results were puzzling. Every natural explanation failed. Meanwhile, the Coptic Patriarchate formed a formal commission. It interviewed witnesses separately: Christians, Muslims, skeptics, even children, to avoid shared influence. The testimonies were astonishingly similar. A woman-shaped light above the dome, silent and luminous. sometimes bowing, sometimes blessing. The investigators could find no trace of collusion or hysteria. Scientists offered theories one after another. Some blamed atmospheric reflection, the sort of mirage created when warm air meets cool. Meteorologists quickly pointed out that mirages appear on the horizon, not in the sky, and vanish within minutes, not hours. Others suggested ball lightning, but that burns blue and erratic, not steady white for whole nights. A few mentioned electrical discharge from the church's metal cross, yet the glow was far too large, and there had been no storms. The bolder skeptics accused the church of staging a hoax to attract pilgrims. Reporters searched the attics and nearby rooftops for hidden lamps. None were found, and the church's power capacity, barely enough to light its sanctuary, could never have fed industrial projectors. The police eventually locked the roofs so that no one, believer or skeptic, could alter the scene. Still, the light returned. Psychologists proposed mass hallucination. But the apparition had been photographed from multiple streets, and even by foreign tourists who didn't know one another. Illusion cannot imprint on film. Whatever it was, it left traces of real light. When the government received these conflicting reports, it quietly referred the case to the highest religious authority in Egypt. Pope Kyrillos Roman VI, Patriarch of the Coptic Orthodox Church, visited the site himself. After weeks of review, the Patriarchate issued its declaration on May 4, 1968. The Virgin Mary has appeared several times above the Church of St. Mary in Zeitoun. These appearances are genuine and not of natural origin. Even the state, then proudly secular, did not contest it. President Nasser ordered the police to maintain order and allow the crowds to gather. For the first time in years, Christians and Muslims in Egypt shared a headline that united rather than divided them. International media descended on Cairo. Articles in Life, Paris Match, and The Times called it the Light Over Cairo. Journalists who came skeptical left unsettled, unable to dismiss what their cameras had caught. Grainy frames showed a human outline brighter than any lamp, surrounded by smaller glowing shapes like birds in flight. Half a century later, new analysts continue to revisit the evidence. Modern physicists examining the photographs note that the light's intensity exceeds any known projection equipment available in 1968. Digital enhancement confirms that the glow cast shadows on the dome, proof of a real luminous source. No record of aircraft or spotlights aligns with the dates of the sightings. For believers, this endless debate is secondary. For skeptics, it is the core of the fascination. Zeitoun refuses to fit neatly into either category. It is at once an event of faith and of observation, a moment that belongs to everyone and to no one. Whether a divine sign, a phenomenon of nature, or something still unnamed, the light over Zeitoun reminds both sides of the same truth. Wonder itself is real. When the lights finally stopped appearing above the church in 1971, Cairo felt quieter than before. The streets that had once held 500,000 people waiting through the night returned to their ordinary rhythms, cars honking, vendors shouting, children running between shops. The little church on Toman Bay Street blended again into the neighborhood's dust and noise. Yet the memory of what people had witnessed refused to fade. The miracle, or whatever it was, had already slipped beyond the reach of investigation and into the deeper territory of memory. Those who were there say the hardest thing to describe was not what they saw, but what they felt. One man recalled that he had gone with his friends to laugh at the believers. When the light came, he said, "I could not speak. It was as if the air became heavy with peace." Another, a Muslim tailor from a nearby street, said he had prayed out loud for the first time in years. "I did not know which words to use," he admitted, "so I just said thank you." For 3 years, that gratitude hovered over the city like a fragrance, the silence that spoke. Most reported apparitions carry a message: warnings, prophecies, instructions. Zeitoun had none of that. There were no words, no gestures demanding attention, no chosen seers to interpret what heaven wanted. The figure of Mary simply appeared and disappeared, saying nothing. For theologians, that silence became the most astonishing part of the event. They said it was the silence of mercy, a moment when the divine presence didn't need to correct or command, only to remind people that it was still there. For ordinary witnesses, the absence of words meant the event belonged to everyone. No one could claim to have been singled out. The mechanic who first saw the light was as much a witness as the patriarch who later confirmed it. The unspoken message was equality under grace, that every person, believer or skeptic, was allowed to stand in that glow for a while and wonder. A nation in need of hope. Egypt in 1968 was not an easy place. The war with Israel the year before had ended in humiliation. The national mood was despair. Many had lost faith in politics and progress alike. Factories were failing, families were grieving, and even faith communities were divided. The Light Over Zeitoun came into that darkness like an uninvited guest carrying comfort. President Nasser himself, though cautious of religious enthusiasm, is said to have watched the phenomenon from a nearby car. In a country fractured by defeat, the apparition gave people something they could share without argument. The newspapers, even the government ones, printed the story with an unusual gentleness. They did not use the word miracle, but they did not mock it either. That restraint itself was remarkable. For once, Egypt's journalists, engineers, clerics, and skeptics all described the same thing and admitted they didn't fully understand it. In a world obsessed with explanations, the humility of not knowing was its own kind of faith. Faith beyond division. Because the event was visible to everyone, it quietly dismantled old boundaries. Christians and Muslims prayed side by side. Some called it a Marian miracle. Others called it a sign from God without defining who sent it. The effect was the same. For a few hours each night, a divided people became a congregation. Many years later, interfaith groups in Cairo still point to Zeitoun as proof that reverence can unite more deeply than doctrine can divide. Inside the Coptic community, the apparition strengthened a sense of resilience. The Copts had endured centuries of marginalization, yet suddenly their small church had become a beacon known around the world. But the patriarchate refused to exploit the fame. No souvenirs were sold, no pilgrim industry encouraged. The church leadership insisted that the light's purpose was spiritual, not commercial. She came to comfort, not to advertise, one bishop said. The continuing mystery. Scientists who revisit the photographs with modern tools still argue over what happened. Computer models can simulate reflections, but none reproduce the moving figure captured by multiple cameras from different angles. Some say an atmospheric plasma could, in theory, form above a conductive dome. Others dismiss that as wishful physics. Whatever the explanation, it cannot account for the timing the light's habit of appearing exactly when the crowds had gathered to pray and vanishing when they dispersed. For believers, this scientific impasse is not a problem. It is the point. Mystery, they say, is not an absence of knowledge, but an overflow of meaning. For skeptics, the mystery remains an open file, a reminder that nature still holds surprises we have not yet named. Either way, Zeitoun continues to inspire curiosity, not conflict. The light that stayed. Even after the apparitions ceased, the people who lived nearby said the church somehow felt different. Pilgrims continued to visit, sometimes kneeling on the asphalt where the crowds had once stood shoulder to shoulder. A few left candles at the base of the dome. Others simply looked up for a moment before walking away. No new lights appeared, but the quiet expectation itself became holy. One night each year, on the anniversary of the first sighting, the church holds a simple vigil. There are no fireworks or elaborate processions, just prayers, hymns, and the same hope that the world might once again fall silent enough to notice grace when it passes overhead. The meaning for our time. In today's world so full of noise, division, and endless argument, the story of Zeitoun feels almost impossible. We are used to miracles arriving with headlines and hashtags, not with silence. But maybe that is why the event still matters. It reminds us that awe doesn't depend on proof. It depends on attention. The people of Cairo didn't analyze the light while it shone. They simply looked. In that act of looking together, they found community. That is what the world still needs. Shared wonder, a moment when belief and doubt stand side by side, and for once, agree that something beautiful has happened. When asked decades later what he thought the apparition meant, one elderly witness paused and said, "It was as if heaven wanted to tell us that light still belongs to everyone." He smiled, then added, "Maybe that's enough." In the end, the miracle of Zeitoun was not the light itself, but the silence it created. It asked nothing, demanded nothing, but left behind the certainty that peace is possible. For 3 years, a woman of light stood above a small church and said nothing. And somehow the whole city heard.